The next speaker's name is Burke Holland, and he's a developer at Microsoft. So he's basically going to be talking about a fun topic, which is on VS Code, and showing you some tricks you can actually do with your editor, which is VS Code. So, and Burke, over to you.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for having me, and good morning, or I guess good afternoon. I don't know what I think we're 6 hours, 8 hours, something like that off. So it's early in the morning here, but it's a pleasure to be with you all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. So we've got a lot to go over today, so I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and let's get started here. So let me do that. Let's figure out how to share my screen. Technology is hard. All right, there we go. Can everybody see this? I got a little Zoom window sticking over the side, but I think we're good. Let me see if I can move this stuff out of the way. Okay.
Yeah, I think you need to zoom in a little bit.
Zoom in a little bit? Oh no, it's gonna mess up my ASCII art. Let's see here. Oh no!
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me get through this slide, and then I'll zoom in a bunch on the next one, so we can make sure people in the back can see there. Because
Okay, cool.
I know it can be hard. All right, are we ready to go?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, this session is called VS Code Can Do That, and it's all about VS Code. So we're gonna spend 30 minutes here just talking about VS Code, what it can do, and I'm just going to show you some things that I think are cool about VS Code. Some of them you may already know, but I think for some people, some of this stuff may be new, and you may be surprised at what VS Code actually can do, because it can do a whole lot of stuff. It's crazy. My name is Burke Holland. I'll zoom in on that part, right, because that's the important part, my name right there, so we can zoom in on that. And I do work at Microsoft. And I work on the same team as Sarah Drasner and Brian Holt, and we work on the cloud, hopefully not the angry cloud, where we try to make the cloud a nicer place for JavaScript developers. And we use VS Code, and we work closely with the VS Code team as well. We're not on the VS Code team, but that team, we meet with them weekly. We know them well. So I would like to think that qualifies me to give a talk on VS Code. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Let's go through the talk, and you can be the judge at the end whether or not I've provided some value here, but I think we'll be able to look at a lot of really cool stuff. So let's just jump right into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about in regards to VS Code is the appearance. Now, you'll notice that my editor here, let me come over to some actual code. My editor here has a light theme to it. I know that's an unpopular opinion. I like light editor themes. I realize that according to the rules of science, it's not good for your eyes, but I don't care about science or facts, so I just go with a light editor theme. If you are interested in some dark editor themes, I want to show you two that are very, very really, really nice to look at. So I'm going to go to my themes here. And the first one that I want to show you is one called Cobalt 2, and that's from Wes Boss. This theme is interesting because scientifically speaking, the best color combination for your eyeballs is a dark blue background with bright yellow text. Now, you don't see that a lot because it's really garish. It's kind of hard to look at, but Wes has been able to somehow pull this off. And even I have to admit, if I was going to pick a dark editor theme, this might be it. Let me show you one more here that you got to look at. Sarah created one called Night Owl that is really fantastic. This one is just amazing. So if you're looking for that dark editor theme, and you don't want a light editor theme, you don't want to be cool like me, you can use a dark editor theme here, and one of those is a fantastic choice. So that's Night Owl and Cobalt 2. I'd recommend those. Let me go back to the right editor theme. There we go. That's the right one. All right, let's talk about a few more appearance items. Do you see this sidebar over here on the left? This is called the sidebar. We can collapse this thing with Command B, which is nice and make some more room. But by default, the sidebar shows up on the left side of VS Code. And that's fine. But I would like you to notice that when you collapse the sidebar, your code, if you watch these import statements here, your code will jump in and out of the screen like this. See how it moves like that? I don't know how well that's translating. But that's really jarring for your eyes. You don't realize it, but it actually pulls the context out of your brain for just a split second, and then you have to adjust your eyes and put your context back. So it's actually better if you go to view and then you put this thing, toggle, move the sidebar to the right. Well, now the sidebar is on the right. If you've ever used Visual Studio before, this setup will look familiar to you. For most everyone else, this is a little bit weird. But you'll notice here when I collapse the sidebar when it's on the right, look at my code. It doesn't move. It stays right where it is. And that's really, really nice for your eyes. Your eyes will thank you for this. So that's another thing you can do is move your sidebar to the right. Another thing you can do is you can adjust these icons over here with some great icon themes. The one that I use is called Material Icons. Material Icons. And Material Icons has some great icons here for the different file types. What's really cool is if you do a new file, something like, I don't know, maybe you're using Pug, and look at that. You get an actual, you get a Pug face. I don't know if people can see when I zoom in there, but that's enough reason right there to get that icon theme. It's really cool. All right, so that's that. Another one that I want to show you is I want to talk about fonts for a second. So the default font in Visual Studio Code is, well, to be honest, I'm not sure what it is, but there's another font that you can use that's called Code. So if you go out to the internet, let's go to the internet, and here's my ASCII art generator, and let's look for Code. Okay, and here we go. And you can just download this right here. And inside of this, there's a TTF file, and then you can double click that and hope there's not a virus in there, and it'll install it into your computer. And then once you have that font installed, you can use it inside of VS Code. So I'm gonna collapse our sidebar for a second, and I'm gonna go to user settings. You'll see me using a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I'm not gonna say all of them out loud. The one I just did was Command, comma, to user settings. You can also do that by going Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P if you're on Windows and just looking for user settings, open user settings. So once you're in your user settings here, you have two different ones. User settings is global, workspace settings is just for the current project that you're in. Most of the time you'll put these in user settings. So what you can do here is you can add in a setting for Code right here, setting your font family and then your font ligatures as well. Now, if you don't know what font ligatures are, they are a way to represent symbols that we use in code that are comprised of multiple or compound symbols in one symbol. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm gonna click save here, and you'll notice that the font changes slightly. You may not have seen it, it happens pretty fast. But where it'll show up, let's go to this file here, and let's look at something like, let's just come down here and do, let's say we have a function. We're gonna make a new function. Let's just do that. I'll tell you what, let's go down here to the bottom. Let's just do a new function, okay? And then we could do a function here, and then we can do a fat arrow. So you'll notice that when I did that fat arrow there, I got an actual fat arrow, just like that, which is pretty cool. It also works for things like equals equals. So if you did equals equals, you get a double equals. And if you do equals equals equals, you get a triple equals, and you can do not equals, and you get a not equals. And of course, this works for people that are not using this font. So if you use Code and then you give it to someone who doesn't, it still works for them in their font. They just see the 3 equals and you see that nifty triple equals. So that's Code and font ligatures. A lot of people use font ligatures. You don't have to, but it's a lot of fun. And it adds a lot of character to your editor, so that's pretty cool. Christian, how's my font size here? Are we good? Can everybody see all right?
It's good, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, we've spent enough time. There's a lot of different things that you can do with the appearance. You can change the cursor style. You can make it so your text explodes when you type. You can do all sorts of stuff. But we don't have a whole lot of time, so I want to move through some other stuff. And don't worry if I'm moving quickly and you're forgetting some of these things. You'll forget most of them, and that's okay. I'm going to give you one place at the end where you can go to learn about all of these things on your own time. So I'll give you all of the tips that we're going to do here today, plus a bunch that I just don't even have time to get into. All right, so let's move on. And I want to talk for a second about Emmet. Now, a lot of people will be familiar with Emmet, but some people won't be. So just to go over it very briefly, one way to create a div is like this, right? But it kind of gets a pain when you're creating these things all the time. those carets there. So what you can do instead with Emmet is just type div and then hit tab, and you get a div. And then you can do things like div.main will give you a class of main with maybe an ID of body, something like that. So Emmet just makes it faster for you to compose HTML. And I mean really fast. You can add an entire page of HTML just by typing bang, and then you get a whole page of HTML. And you'll notice that you get these tab stops in here, so you can move through these things like this. And then you can come down and start writing in your body. Now, there's a whole different list of Emmet shortcuts. There's an Emmet cheat sheet that you can check out. If you just Google Emmet and Emmet cheat sheet, I'm not going to go through all of that because it can get really, really complex. You can have, if we look at something like this right here, I mean, that's just a lot of code. And you get a Bootstrap nav bar from that, but when you just look at it, if you don't know Emmet, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't want to go over all the syntax. I just want you to be aware that this does work. Now, for those who already knew Emmet, you're like, I already knew that. Okay, all right. So maybe you didn't know that Emmet can do this. What say we had an image, something like this. And in that image, let's say our source was this file here. Okay. Now, one of the things that we want to do when we have an image is we want to specify the width and the height of our image. And we do that because if we don't, the browser doesn't know how much room to reserve on the page. And so when the page loads, it won't reserve any room at all. And then when the image jumps in, the whole page jumps. So we want to put a width and a height on our images. That's kind of a pain because we don't know what the width and height of this image is. So one way for us to find out would be to just go to the image, which is here. That's my dog Grover. He says hello. And we can see it's 640 by 640. But we don't want to be looking up all of our image sizes all the time. That's a pain. So what we can do instead is we can just come to the end of the line, open our command palette with Command or Control-Shift-P, and we can say update image size. It's part of the Emmet commands here. And when we do that, boom, Emmet automatically knows how big that picture is and can update your images. And furthermore, this works in some places where you might not expect it. Places like, check this out. Let's say we add in a remote image, right? This is an image that's out on the internet. Let's check it out. There we go. Now we can see from this, I've got an extension installed that actually shows me in the pop-up here how big these images are. But again, we can let Emmet do the work here by saying Command-Shift-P and update image size, and boom, it can do that. It's pretty amazing. Now, it also works in CSS. So if you were using a background image in CSS and you wanted to automatically get the width and height, it's another place where it's kind of a pain. You can do that. The same update image size works in CSS when you're setting the background URL for an image as it does here in that image tag, which is pretty cool. One last thing on Emmet, it can also do math. So in case you don't know what 1 + 1 is, you're having a rough day and you just can't be bothered to do math, you can just highlight that, say math. And it will evaluate the math expression for you. So just a nice way to do calculations inline without having to jump up and open your calculator app or use your brain on a day when you're just not having it. So that's Emmet and some of the different things that you can do with it. It does a whole lot more than that. I just wanted you to be aware. Of course, it also works in CSS. So if we had something like the body, and let's say you wanted padding, but you don't know, you just hit P and tab and you get padding. If you hit P5, you get padding 5 pixels. So again, just be aware of all the stuff that Emmet can do, and then you can go take a look at that and dig in there. Let's talk about Prettier for a second. I've got some React code here that I've written, so you know that I'm very, very smart. And in this React code that I've written, I've got a lot of different formatting here. Well, this one's actually formatted pretty well, but let's say we had something up here where we had like, we do this a lot. We might have something like, let's do component did mount. And then inside of that, maybe we have like, we're doing some sort of fetch. So var result equals fetch, right? And then we've got some URL, with some ID, which then returns a promise. Which has some results in it, and we take that to JSON. Actually, we don't need this. I think we can just do this. And then we can do then, and then we take that, and we want to We want to pull that JSON in, and then we actually want to return the JSON right there. Now, the thing about this is that some of these times these promises get long, and we're not really sure where to put them. So sometimes we're like, well, I'll break it here, and then here, and then someone else comes along, and they start breaking their promises here, and then someone else puts them all on the same line, and you're like, ah. Of course, if your promises are lengthy, then this gets just magnified. So one of the things that you can do is install an extension called Prettier. So if we look for the Prettier extension, it's right here by Esmond Peterson. It's one of the most popular extensions in the marketplace. And what it does is, let's go here and say Command-Shift-P, and we'll say Prettier. We'll just say format, format document. And you'll notice that Prettier automatically formats this for us based on some rules that have already been defined. Now, these rules can be defined in a Prettier config file. You can even define rules in ESLint and have Prettier observe ESLint, which it does by default. So let me show you how this works in a more complex example. Let's say you have a file like this. Actually, let's do a different one. We've got one that's in bad shape here. This one right here. Now, this file has a lot of red squigglies in it because it's using double quotes instead of single quotes, and the TS-lint is complaining about that. And also, it has no semicolons. So whoever wrote this JavaScript is a no semicolon person. So if that's you and you are like me and you're a definitely semicolon person, or that's just what your project calls for and your team requirements are, you can just say format document and watch this. Boom, all the quotes get changed and the semicolons are back. So that's what Prettier does for you. And of course, you can set that automatically instead of saying format document all the time. You can come to your user settings. You can come down here to the bottom and you can say, let's add in a setting for editor.format on save. And we'll just set that to true. And now Prettier will just fire every single time you click save. Prettier will fire on your document. Now, if you get into a situation where you don't want Prettier to work, because sometimes you want it on and sometimes you want it off, there's an extension called the formatting toggle. And the formatting toggle, all it does is turn off and on that automatic formatting. So you can just say toggle format on save like this. Let's say right there, and then it'll go off, and then you can toggle it back on again. So that's how you can control the format on save to either make your code prettier or not make it prettier, depending on whether or not you want to use that. So that's Prettier, and super helpful. We've got some snippets here. I want to kind of move through and talk about some more advanced things. Let's talk about type checking for a minute. Here's a JavaScript file that's got a ton of mistakes in it, but they're not actually, they're not readily apparent. If you looked at this for a second, you'd probably pick them out. But I write JavaScript like this all the time. But one of the things that we can do is we can actually use the TypeScript compiler to check this file for errors. So we can say @tscheck, and we get squigglies. And if we press F8, it will move us through the squigglies. So let's start with this one up here. I moved down too far. So right here, cannot find name Rick. All right, we can fix that. Okay, cool. Then we'll do F8 again. Cannot find X. All right, we'll fix that. F8 again. Property blog does not exist on type console. Did you mean log? Yes, I did. I wish blog was a method on console, but it isn't. So I use type blog like that. So that's how you can use the TypeScript compiler to check your code. Notice we're not even using TypeScript here, but we can still use the compiler. Now, if you wanted to use something like this at a project-wide level, you wouldn't do this in every file because that just is not going to fly, having this whack tscheck at the top of your file. So if you come here to your user settings, you can there's a setting called implicit project project config check.js, okay? Not terribly intuitive. I don't if somebody hadn't showed me that, I don't know that I would have thought to look for that particular setting, but there it is. And we set that to true, and then we'll get that same TypeScript checking on every JavaScript file in the project, every single one. And you might want to add that to workspace settings instead of user settings, so it's on a project basis. All right, let's do some more advanced things here. Let's get into it really. So let's take a look at something like, I'm going to move over to this React app here. So this is a React app. Let me fire it up. Let's just do npm start. And this is really the simplest React app you can possibly have. And hopefully it'll fire. Here we go. So this is React. You might recognize this as Create React App. And one of the things that React devs love to talk about is how it's only JavaScript, so you can do cool things like break inside of templates. Now, normally if you were going to debug a React app, you would do it just like this. But I would like to propose to you here today and now that there is a better way to debug your front-end apps. It's actually easier to debug in the same place where you write your code. Writing code in one place and debugging it in another is not the end of the world, but it's just a better experience. And VS Code can do that. So let me remove this. Let's continue on. Let's come back to our editor here. And what we want to do is we're going to come over and we're going to add in a debug setting here. So I'm going to click on this little gear up at the top. And I've got the Chrome debugger installed. So that's right here. That's an extension. So we'll select this. And the Chrome debugger is going to come over here and it's going to try to figure out what our settings are. Well, this isn't exactly right. The URL of our app is going to be 3000. And then our workspace folder is, if we come over here and look, we are in SRC. That's where our code is. That's what it wants to know right here. So let's go ahead and save all this. And then now in our debug, we've got a new setting here, launch Chrome against localhost. So I'm going to go ahead and fire this up. And when that fires up, what you'll notice is we get another instance of Chrome. See how there's two now? This was the first one we had. This is the one that VS Code launched, but it's running that same React app on port 3000 here. And now, check this out. We can come back and say app.js, and let's remove all this noise from the top and the bottom. Add a breakpoint right here. Go ahead and refresh. And boom, now we're editing our React code right inside of Visual Studio Code, which is amazing. And this is a far better debugging and editing experience, at least in my opinion, because all of my code is right here. If I change my code, it still works, okay? And so just a different way to debug your applications, and be aware that Visual Studio Code is very good at debugging front-end apps. It doesn't really care where your app runs, as long as it's running on some sort of node process, which it is, it can attach automatically to that process and help you debug. So that's pretty cool. That's React app. Let's jump over and look at something like an Express app. So this is a very simple Express app here. I'm going to go back to my React app. Let's go ahead and kill this. I'm going to pull up the terminal and kill this here as well. If you didn't know, VS Code has a full-on terminal, so you can do cool stuff like this and impress your friends. There you go. Look cool. Like when people are looking at you, what are you doing? I'm hacking the internet. Leave me alone. I'm busy. Go ahead and close this out here. All right. So let's move over to our Express app here. Where was it? There it is. Now with an Express app, Express is interesting because you can actually run this without any sort of launch configuration at all. But what I want to show you is the built-in support for Docker that you can get with VS Code. So if you've not used Docker before and you're not familiar with what it is, just understand that Docker is kind of like an EXE for your web apps. You know how an EXE, you have everything that you need inside of that EXE, and then when you run it, it just runs. It has all of the dependencies that it needs. It has everything. So Docker is the same way. You basically create this container which has in it everything you need. It has Node, it has any of your dependencies installed, and then you can just throw it up on a server and it just works. It's kind of magical. So let me show you how you can use Docker inside of VS Code. I'm going to come over here to the Docker extension. So again, these are extensions you can install. This one's from Microsoft, straight to you with love. And you need to have Docker installed on your machine in order for this to work. And I actually don't have Docker running, so I'm going to go ahead and fire that up here. Now, in order for us to run this application, this Express application in Docker, we actually need to add some Docker files here to do that. But we don't know anything about Docker files because we're Burke, and Burke learns very slowly. So what we can do here is come and say Command-Shift-P, and then we'll say Docker, and we'll add Docker files to Workspace. Now watch this. It's going to ask us what our runtime is. We're going to say node. What port are we listening on? 3000, that's right. And boom, all of our Docker files just got added to this application. we got the Docker compose, we got the Docker file, and we've even got a Docker ignore file. So now that we've got this, we can run this container. So let's do Docker compose up. And we got two choices. We can compose debug or compose. Let's just compose for the moment. And that will go ahead and build our container here. And if we go out to our web app here to run this, we're now running our Express app on port 3000. Over in our Docker container here, you can see it's running right there. It's got the green dot. We could right click and say show logs, okay? And that's gonna show the logs. If I come over here and refresh a couple more times, here's all the logs. Even better yet, we can attach our shell and we can look at all the files inside of our Docker container. So this is amazing. We don't know anything about Docker. All of these are commands on the Docker command line, but I cannot remember command line switches and flags. So this makes it easier for me to actually work with Docker. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. So let's take another look at another thing you can do with Docker in VS Code. I'm gonna go ahead and stop this container here. I'm gonna close this. And I wanna show you something really interesting. If you click on this gear here, let's add in a launch configuration for Node. So this is a simple, this just runs our Node app. And you can see Visual Studio Code is smart enough to know how to run an Express app. It configures it for you automatically. But watch this. We're gonna click Add Configuration, and we're gonna say Docker attached to Node. And now we have a Docker debug configuration. And it knows all about our Docker setup because it's read our Docker files. So what can we do with this? Well, watch this. Let's save our launch configuration. Let's do Docker compose up, and this time we're gonna choose the debug file. I'm gonna show you why this file is here. Let's go ahead and do that, and that will go ahead and run our debug build. That's running. Let's go back. We can see we should be able to see our container running here. It's right there. And now watch this. Let's come over to our index file. Let's drop a breakpoint here. We'll come back to our debug, and we'll do our Docker attached to Node. And go ahead and hit that. Let that attach. Now come back to our application, refresh, and we are now debugging our application inside of the Docker container, which is amazing stuff. If you've worked with Docker before, you know that it can be really, really difficult after you get these things inside of containers to work with them. So this is just kind of magical. And now that we've got this container, of course, we're ready to deploy this. We can say right click, let's find our image up here. We can right click it and say push like this, and it will push it up to Docker Hub. And it does need me to log in here, but we can push it up to Docker Hub, and then we can pull it in from Docker Hub and host it anywhere. Places like Azure, or you can even host it on Azure. All of those will work with Docker. Now, let's look at one more thing because we got a couple more minutes here. There are a ton of extensions for working with Azure directly from within VS Code. There's App Service for working with any sites that you have hosted. So here you can see, or you will see here, all of my subscriptions and all of my different sites. You can build serverless functions directly from VS Code, which you see here. So you can start a new function project, you can run them locally, you can debug your serverless functions locally. And then we have one for storage. One I want to look at is called Cosmos DB. Now, Cosmos DB is a database that Azure provides that is NoSQL, and it's multi-model and multi-schema, which basically means that you can create a NoSQL database that's either has a Mongo API, has the Gremlin API, has the Cassandra API. So you sort of pick your API, and then the extension allows you to get to that data. Now, what's interesting about this extension is that it's not just Cosmos DB. This extension will actually attach to any MongoDB database anywhere. So I've got mine attached locally here to my local host, and you can see these are the different databases that I have. Now check this out. If I right-click this and say connect, we're connected. Okay, cool. I'm gonna now come over and I'm gonna say Mongo Scrapbook, new Mongo Scrapbook. And now I'm gonna hit DB dot, and we can see I get IntelliSense for all the collections I have, and then I can do find, and then I can do Command P, execute MongoDB command, and boom, we get back all of the records that we have in this database. So if you're working with any sort of MongoDB, you don't have to download a third-party tool to work with that database. You can query, test, do everything you need right in the same place where you write your code, which is so nice, so wonderful. All right, I told you I'd give you a resource. We got 2 minutes left, and we got so many more things that we could go over here. Let's go back to our slides. We didn't get to NPM tools or some of the other stuff that I wanted to get to. But since I don't have that much time, let me just leave you with, let's go back to Chrome here. If you just go to vscodecantothat.com, you'll see all of the tips that we did today. I share a different tip every Friday. So we've got all sorts of stuff here from how to use live share to how to create an interactive scratch pad, how to do serverless, some of the visual tweaks we talked about. In addition, we also give you a 2-minute video every month that shows all of the release highlights for the next release, because Visual Studio Code moves really, really fast in terms of adding features. So it iterates so fast that it's hard to keep up with what's new. And Brian Clark does that every month right here on vscodecantothat.com. So that's all the time I have. I'm actually 1 minute early. I don't know if I was supposed to leave time for questions, but I didn't. So thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much, Burke. I don't know if you can still hear us, right?
Yes.
Yeah, can you put on that your host mask so we can say hi to it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so questions. Do you have questions for him?
Sure.
Questions? Come. Come get him.
Hi, boy. Yeah. I cannot change my default on VS Code. Like, if I don't want to use Chrome, how can I change it to Mozilla Firefox?
How can you change the default browser that it opens?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head. I would have to go and look. Google would probably be your best friend there.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I have a problem with VS Code Lifestyle. Okay. After closing it and launch that another application on it, it was still loading the previous one.
Did you say that was with live share?
No, I said VS Code Live Server.
Oh. So are you using a live server plugin extension?
Yeah.
So for live reloading?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. So can you restate the problem again? You said that it's. What did you say there?
I used it to load a web page. Okay. Then after shutting down the process, then to load another web page, it was loading the previous one. Okay, you can answer that.
I think.
Yeah, I think he's saying, so assuming I launched a live server with localhost 3000, and then I shut down VS Code, and whenever I visit localhost 3000, it seems like VS Code has just seized that port forever.
Yes. I've actually noticed this myself with a couple of different processes here, and really the only tip that I have for how to handle this is to learn how to kill that specific process. So basically, I've just sort of memorized LOSF-I TCP : whatever 3000, which kills that particular process. But yeah, I've seen the same thing, and I don't have a good answer for you other than I share your pain.
All right, Burke, I have two questions. So the first question is, when you're using your terminal within VS Code, I think after some time you start to experience this kind of junky experience where it kind of slowed down in a way. So I don't know, is there a particular way to optimize performance for that? That's for the first question. And then the second question is, are you trying to eradicate Sublime from the market?
All right, so let me get the first question right. You said the first question that the extensions were making it slow?
The terminal, running your terminal within VS Code. After some time, it starts slowing down the whole experience, like the VS Code, the editor itself. How do you optimize for performance?
Yeah, so usually that's caused by extensions. So, and there is there's a process explorer that you can see inside of VS Code, and it will show you the processes that are running and what memory they're using. So you can see there's the main process, there's my window, and any extensions I have. So it'll show you what's getting usage. I don't know if you watch this or not, but that's what I would do when it starts to slow down, number one. And then number two, you want to start looking for these things down here. So these things are built in, these Electron stuff. If that seems to be your problem, then that's a GitHub issue. If you could open please on the VS Code repo. But my guess is you're going to have some sort of extension that's up here at the top. Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the second one was, are we trying to replicate Sublime?
Are you trying to eradicate Sublime from the market?
Oh, no. We're not trying to do that. So here's the thing. When it comes to text editors, because I asked the VS Code, or Amanda Silver, who's the VP on the VS Code team, I said, why do we need another text editor? We have plenty of text editors. So here's the thing about VS Code that makes it a little bit different. VS Code is a text editor, but it's also as much of an IDE as you want it to be. So as you can see, you can just edit text, or you can query a database. It's up to you. And you can add that stuff in. So what VS Code is trying to do is it's trying to sit in the bridge between full-on IDE, which would be like Visual Studio or Eclipse, something like that, and a very lightweight and fast text editor. So no, the goal is not to eradicate anybody from the market, but to just experiment and see if developers would appreciate a text editor that could grow and do a whole lot more if they wanted it to. And it turns out, yeah, we like that.
All right, thank you, Burke. Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here this morning. I really appreciate it.
All right, my regards to Horst Jizz.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. What? He's back. Did you hear what I said? Okay, it's gone. All right. Yeah, how many of